Asunder. After the War of the Worlds. For more information, please visit servingworlds.com. Written and performed by John Miro. When he reached the dock's end, he jumped onto a sailboat moored there and hopped up onto its cabin. More boats were nestled close together all the way to the rock wall that encircled the protected harbor. All three men leaped and climbed their way across the tight, bobbing masses of wood and metal as explosions lit up around them. An awkward landing between boats set Marcus sideways, and in that moment he could see the walking machine reach an impossibly long third leg out of the water and catch on the rock wall. The tripod trembled there, slowed, and awkwardly tried to mount the wall, the human at the wheel with no experience. Marcus spared the hung-up tripod, and the pirate at the wheel a snort of derision before turning back to flee for his life. The first moments of panic began to lift. This wasn't one of the monsters that had come to kill them all, just an awkward human being trying to take what it wanted, like so many before him. Just a man. Marcus watched the tripod lash its tentacles onto the masts of a ship to try to steady itself. It took another moment to right itself, and then waded into the harbor to smash through the deck of a ship 3 slips away from Pegasus. His lungs burned to make the oxygen he needed, but his brain worked the same as always, divorced from the devastation falling around him. The pirates weren't talking now. They were destroying. They weren't here to capture the port. Why? Marcus wondered. Pirates were all about taking things, not destroying them. What was this game? Not 30 feet from the high rock wall, Marcus jerked his body back and wrapped an elbow around the mainsail of a yacht. He managed to spin himself around the mainsail, rather than fall into the water beyond, where the still smoking wreckage of 2 ships were slowly sinking below the surface. The sailboat bobbed with the weight of Hobbes careening past, tumbling towards the edge. Marcus reached for him but came up short. Hobbes screamed, windmilling to stop himself from falling over. The engineer ended up on the gunwale, on his tiptoes, teetering, and Marcus winced, sure his friend was bound for the drink. When the boat bobbed again with the force of Lieutenant Burns' arrival, Hobbes' body tipped past the point of no return and began to pick up speed. The lieutenant stretched his hand out just then and managed to close around one of Hobbes' suspenders. With the lieutenant as a lifeline, Hobbes' reeling arms sent him careening back into the sunken deck of the small sailboat. Marcus's wincing eyes closed all the way just before the 2 men collided in a heap. "Bugger!" Burns shouted. "Dashedly sorry, sir," he wheezed a moment later. Striving seriously for the title of gentleman as well as officer, it seemed to Marcus to care about his profanity at a moment like this. Marcus grinned at the expense of the clean-speaking sailor, even as energy beams flew around his head and set fire to the main sail. "God for Kate!" wailed Hobbes. Marcus heard screaming, boats burning. He knew the toll the pirates would exact. He felt it in his bones, and his blood was up. He had to reach that cannon. He stomped down a leg, ever the bad habit for a sailor, and stumbled on a wet patch on the deck of the sailboat. He reached his hand out for the mainsail and grabbed a handful of rope to steady himself. With a grin, he stared up at the burning mainsail and the rope in his hand. "Give me your knife, Hobbes." Hobbes looked stricken. "I left it on Pegasus. It's in the tool chest." There was a snick of metal against metal from behind. "Will this do?" Marcus turned to see Burns's officer's sword in his hand and smiled. A few cuts and a few knots later, Marcus was ready. He held the rope out for Burns to slice, and his sword made good, parting the rope with one pass. With the rope in hand, Marcus climbed back the way he'd come, over one boat, then to the boat after that, a bigger sailboat, one that sat higher in the water. He climbed atop its cabin, took a deep breath, and made a running leap back towards the rock wall. He swung high in the air, and when his gut told him to let go of the rope, he did so with a roar. The rock wall came toward him. He landed just short and gasped as he was dunked into the Atlantic. And a good thing, too, he decided, as his feet stumbled on the rocks beneath the surface, where surely they'd have wrecked himself on the dry rocks above. He'd landed waist-deep in the harbor, and he held fast to the wall. He scrabbled up and tossed the rope back towards the sailboat, and half-hopped, half-ran towards the harbor opening. In the reflected orange of dying ships, he could make out the turret station. There was a man there, leaning against the wood and metal shield erected in front of the captured alien weapon. "Hello!" Marcus called out. Nothing moved. Marcus hurried closer, sure something was amiss. In a few more steps, he understood. There was no hum from the weapon. It wasn't on. It wasn't armed. He reached out for the coat of the soldier leaning against the wall and tugged him around. The man tumbled down like cordwood, exposing the rich red spray of arterial blood on the wall behind him. Marcus cursed and turned back to the weapon. It was a larger weapon, twice the size of the cannon on Pegasus. He slammed his fist down on the human hot-wired ignition plate, and nothing happened. There was no hum from the weapon, no charge building inside, as he swiveled the barrel to face into the harbor it had been positioned to defend. Not so many screams now. Little was moving either, save for the skyship and the walker and the billows of smoke from its victims. And Pegasus, sinking slowly below the water. The tripod that killed her wandering landwards, lashing out to shatter bodies wherever its two fine tentacles could reach. "No!" he screamed, and slammed his fist into the barrel of the inert weapon again and again. He shook his head to focus and slammed the ignition plates down again. Nothing, just a click, no hum. His shaking fingers reached below the plate, found the copper wiring leading to beneath the barrel, and followed along to where the two wires had been cut through. A dead soldier. Cut wires. Sabotage. Marcus fell to his knees, biting on the wire to clear the insulation and spitting the foul wadding out. He found the other end and chewed it clean as well, then wound them together. He chewed through the second wire. He found the other end and chewed the copper wire clean as well, and then, bracing himself, wound them together. He roared as the shock ripped through him. He dropped the wires and licked his burnt, trembling fingers. Growling low in his throat, he worked up the will to grab them again. And then he did, twisting the ends together as knives stabbed into the back of his hands and up his arms before he let go, bellowing with pain. He was rewarded with the hum of the gun coming to life. He staggered back to the human-engineered turret and grasped the handles. The larger weapon would take even longer to charge than his present to Pegasus had. He looked again for Pegasus, and she was gone, buried under a burning oil slick. Through that thick black cloud, the skyship emerged. Marcus stared at the thing, coming at him and growling like a swarm of angry bees. He knew that when he turned the gun on, gauges on the skyship and the tripod would glow and scream to warn their pilots, and now they came for him. His spine and the back of his neck shivered as power blossomed inside the alien weapon. The skyship banked towards him and began to fire wild. Marcus guessed its pilot hoped to land a lucky shot before Marcus would get his turn. He didn't hurry. He did not rush. He was methodical and practiced as he lined up his shot. He could well imagine the target painted around his head, but he held his fire. Shoot too soon and fire a weak shot. Wait for too long and it wouldn't matter how much of a wallop you delivered, you were dead already. Decisions. Marcus judged the power capacity in the weapon by the sensation crawling up and down his spine. His fingers trembled against the triggers. His eyes watched the force wall blurring the skin of the skyship racing closer, and only when he was sure enough charge had been generated did he squeeze the twin triggers, loosing a slicing beam into the center of the ship. The hum of its weapons disappeared. The cabin lights went dark, and the ship lost altitude and began to tumble. It broke apart when it hit the water's surface, and pieces of garishly covered metal tore free. Marcus and the cannon were unscathed, but for the wind of a piece of wreckage passing harmlessly just feet above. "I almost forgot," Marcus muttered with insane calm, and stared through the targeting assembly as he turned the weapon towards the wall. The tripod was heading his way, firing wildly again, and he was saved only by the inexperience of another pirate helming the walker. Shot after shot flew wide. Rocks nearby exploded on impact. One shot glanced off the alloy of the gun, leaving Marcus blinking, but unharmed, Water geysered into the air. Most of the energy beams lashed the base of the rock wall, but the impacts whipped closer and closer. Stone chips finally flung past Marcus, slashed his forehead, bit into his ear. Halifax, Samantha, Robert. The tripod was almost on him when Marcus's neck shivered. Something in the cannon bloomed back to life, and he mashed his fingers on the triggers. "Sorry, Charlie," he whispered through gritted teeth. The cannon fired, and the sky glowed white. You have been listening to Asunder, the first in a series of tales after the War of the Worlds. For more information, please visit servingworlds.com. Music, Ibrido Umano, by Dano, available at danosongs.com. Title image, War of the Worlds, by Adam Blakemore. Learn more about Adam's artwork at blakey00.deviantart.com. Thank you for listening.